Okay.
Okay, Chair Calabria, we are live.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. Thanks for all you do. And she also suffered through a little rehearsal yesterday, and she's, as all of you know, she's extremely efficient, and I always learn something when we do that together. The start time I have is 6:09 p.m. I believe we're required to announce that. And the first order of business is a roll call. Jennifer, would you help us with that, please?
Sure. Okay, Budget Committee members. Chair Calabria.
Here.
Vice Chair Carson.
Here.
Corrigan. I see him. I just didn't hear it. Okay. All right. Cruz.
Here.
And Dodds is excused. And Zeller is excused. Newt. I don't think she's on. Okay. Buck.
Here.
Thank you. Winland.
Here.
Wynn is excused. Burdick is excused. Boop.
Here.
Mans.
Here.
Raff.
Here.
Okay, so we have 9 present, so we do have a quorum. And I did just want to announce at this point, but prior to the meeting, that Chair Calabria had mentioned that we, in attendance tonight, we do have our Budget Committee alternates, and that would be Shima Salahi and Ronald Brake.
Here.
And here.
Thank you. Okay. The first order of business is to read the 27-page minutes from the last meeting and then approve it. So that might take us a little bit of time. But in lieu of that, perhaps we can just have a motion to accept the minutes, unless there is objection or correction.
Move to accept minutes, Chair.
Second.
Motion made by Councilor Wendland. Second by Councilor Raff. Thank you. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? I don't see any hands, so we'll move to a vote. All those in favor, aye, or raise your hand. I can see. Okay.
Aye.
I believe that was unanimous. Yes. Okay. Thank you very much. That passes unanimously. So we'll dip right into the third item on the agenda, which is a review of budget to actuals from the prior biennium ending June 30th, 2021. And Director Cross, I believe you'll be leading us through this part of the agenda.
Yes, good evening, everybody. So I have here the budget to actuals for the previous biennium. Let's see. Hope I can get this to work. Did it share? Did it share? Hey, okay. So this is basically screenshots of the document that I circulated earlier in the week, or Anthony was nice enough to circulate for me earlier in the week. The other thing is, as I go through this, please ask questions during this so we don't get to the end. Just ask them as we go. If I can't see hands, just speak up. This will be much more entertaining if it's not just me talking about numbers, if there's a little bit of conversation. So please ask a question or two.
Director Cross, is it possible to zoom in on that a little bit, make the image larger?
Yeah. Oh yeah, this is just my lead, and this is just me taking a screenshot of it. Every other one after this is zoomed in and highlighted, so you'll know what we're talking about. This is just the first page of the document that I circulated. So in general, to get going on this, nothing in this biennium to actual, the budget to actual, will be anything different than really what we estimated would be when we were building the 21 to 23 biennial budget. So there isn't anything that we haven't really talked. We've already talked about most of it. It's just the actuals are really close to the estimates that we use to build the beginning balances within the biennium 21-23 budget. So I want to just get that out there first. And the other thing that is we'll go through these and a couple of them that will throw you off is our intergovernmental revenue is much higher in many departments or divisions, as you'll see them in here, but there are departments because we did get $1.2 million worth of CARES money. So where the expenditures happened, we replaced those funds with the CARE money. So like in police or fire or just different places. So you'll see that intergovernmental throughout the whole thing. And then there are some fees, like fees for services for things like, parks and stuff. I'll probably go over things pretty quickly saying, we shut down the parks the parks and rec programs for many months. So, there weren't revenues and that kind of stuff. So anyways, so that's just some common themes through the whole thing. But with that, let's move on to basically starting at the top of page 1. And so these are the revenues that the general fund. So these are non-specific general fund revenues. So like police has their 911 that will be in the police department. Fire has their contracts with Lake Grove and stuff, and those will be in that. These are the non-specific revenues like property taxes, state shared revenues, and that kind of stuff. So what I really wanted to highlight here is the first one is property taxes. We budgeted $73.5 million for a 2-year period. We were pretty much within 2% of our budget. So we were pretty close. I'm just saying COVID really didn't affect that much. People with their escrow accounts after the 2008 housing bubble and stuff, most people have escrow accounts. So our property taxes are coming in really at more of a 95% collection rate, which is what you'll see here. That's what's causing this versus a 94% collection rate. And so, and over the last decade, we probably had like 3 or 4 years around 94%. The last 5 or 6 years have been more around 95.5%. So we usually budget conservatively with the 94%. So I just want to highlight that. And then I also wanted to point out how much the actual of our non-departmental kind of general fund revenues, how much property tax is, when you look at it, 73 million. The next largest is our franchise fees at 5 million. I mean, that just dwarfs, everything that, and that's how important the property taxes are to us. But it makes us kind of stable because it's a pretty stable source of revenues. The next one is our intergovernmental revenue. And you kind of see, I made sure that, was this balance, or was this variance basically large, and was it a large percentage? Like this is a large variance, but it's not a very large percentage of the overall. So those are the ones that I'm trying to highlight and talk through. And like I said, if you pick some other ones and you want to talk about them, I will try to answer them. If I can't, I'll take notes, and in the next week or two, I will get something out with all the questions to the committee if anything I couldn't answer. But with the intergovernmental over the 2-year period, it's liquor tax. Our liquor tax was up $400,000 over the 2-year period. So apparently people were buying a lot of alcohol during COVID. Next would be our licenses and fees. You're going to see that it's down about $1 million over the 2-year period. It's at 65%. What that is, that's our transient lodging tax. There's a point where the occupancy or the amounts we were getting is about 20% of what we were getting the year before. So it's down. It's just that it hit in the middle of different fiscal years. So it wasn't we got 20% all year. It was for the same time period after COVID started, the things did go down to about 20%. And so that's basically what that one is a transient lodging tax. That's kind of the biggest hit to our revenues. But liquor tax made up a good portion of it. So that's pretty good. And then down in the miscellaneous revenues, we budgeted like, 690,000, but we got, we were about 1.6 million. So what that is our health insurance reimbursement. So when the city and our insurance thing, if our experience, and we talked about this, I think at the budget meetings too, is if our experience is actually much lower than what they built our premiums on, so our claims are much lower, we actually get a refund of a good portion that we pay for that. And so not sure if it was what was happening, but we were getting a couple of years, we got $800,000 refunds. And so what, that ended up helping us do the general fund portion of funding for the City Hall project. So that's kind of where we ended up transferring a lot of that money over to the capital reserve fund. But anyway, so that's what that is that's what makes that up, is just people being healthier and not getting sick or whatever. I don't know, during COVID. So we don't get it all the time. Over a 10-year period, we've probably gotten it 3 or 4 times. And it's not usually 800,000. Sometimes it's 300,000 or something like that. So we just, we benefited from people being healthy, our employees. Next, I'd like to go to planning. So we're moving on to page 2 of the 7-page document that I had put out before, if you're following along. If not, it's all highlighted here. And again, the only thing really with planning that really wasn't what we were thinking about is this is that intergovernmental one. And that's basically grants and stuff is what we would usually put in there. And this grant right here is the CARES Act money. So planning did over $250,000 worth of business grants at the beginning. And so this is, you'll see over here, this is us transferring money back over to right here of the CARES money back to reimburse those costs, since they were reimbursable by the CARES Act. Going down to the police department, again, this is going to be kind of a broken record. Their grants and stuff, they were looking at the 368. They came way over by $400,000. Again, CARES. So CARES, it was direct costs, and then at the point when we had to end the grant, we were also able to put public safety time was for the grant purposes was actually, we didn't have to have code it directly to COVID. They just assumed that if it was public safety, they were probably going to COVID calls or calls that do that. So we were actually able to take the last $400,000 worth of grant when we didn't have direct cost to it and apply it 50-50 to both fire and police, to be fair. So that's why you'll see, again, the intergovernmental. And then their miscellaneous revenues are up. Again, it's for medical insurance. So the first part in non-departmental, we took 2 years of that refund and put it toward the City Hall project. Before that, if we'd gotten the smaller 300,000 or whatever we did, or 200,000, we would allocate it back to the departments that were paying the expenses. So based on how many of their employees had that type of insurance, or that, that's how we took it back. So that's really what's causing this miscellaneous revenues in the police department to jump up a little bit. It's not a big dollar amount, but for what they budgeted, it's kind of huge. So I thought I'd explain it. Moving on to fire. Again, here's
Dr. Cross, can I just ask you, I just want to ask a really simple and dumb question, but just to be clear, when we see a number in parentheses, oftentimes we look at financial statements and assume it's a negative number. But in this case, it looks like these are positive variances, and because the percentages in the final column are positive variances, right? So anything over 100% should be interpreted as a favorable variance. Is that correct?
Only, yeah. If over here and it starts with a 3, those are our revenues. And if it starts with a 4, those are our expenditures. So this is both all categories for police that are both revenues and expenditures. So if you see, yeah. And so in revenues, if it's negative, it's basically saying that whatever we received was more than what we budgeted. It'll show up as a negative. It's very positive when it's a revenue, but it's also not so positive when it's an expense. But again, they had more costs with COVID, but they had the revenue coming in to cover it. So
just, is it correct to interpret this to say a positive variance in the percentages in the far right column is favorable for revenues, and a variance over 100% in the far right column for an expense is also favorable? Is that correct?
No, it's not favorable. That means
okay.
we went over budget in that column.
Yeah, so it's okay. I just wanted to make sure, because in some venues, when we look at a over 100% number, we tend to think of it as a favorable variance, but it's not so in this case.
No, and sorry for this is a limitation of our reporting capabilities out of our system. This is about the only 2-year budget report we have.
Okay, thank you. I don't mean to get into the weeds too much, but I just think if we have an overall understanding of how it's structured, we can read it quicker.
No, that's a good question. So with fire, again, the first one, why they're intergovernmentals because of COVID. Now their license and fees is kind of an interesting one. This had to do with more commercial building than we anticipated. So there were a lot more plans check fees. So when the fire marshal is going over the plans, they, there's fees charged for their time and all that kind of stuff. So there was apparently a lot of, it usually was around $30,000-$40,000 a year. It wasn't that much. And then, so it's pretty, there was just a lot more commercial building than was at first anticipated or budgeted. So that's kind of why that one's up. Now, the miscellaneous revenues is also another one, and it's more to do with all these natural disasters that we're having. Well, the one thing that is in there is when we put fire crews or managers and they go work on the forest fires, we get reimbursed by the state and that kind of stuff. And with so much forest fires going on in the last, couple of years, there's been a very large amount of money that we received last year from the state for that time. So anyway, so yeah, being at 1,500% is a big number. And then down here in capital outlay, they just didn't get their fire engine at that point because they weren't quite sure if they're going to be under budget or not. So as we saw, it is included in the Biennium 21-23 budget, it just rolled over. But that's why that's the $720,000. They did pick up a couple vehicles for paramedics to respond to, but didn't get the fire engine. Next, moving on to page 2. I mean, it's still on page 2, but more for the Parks and Rec part, and then golf is page 3. When I ran the report, I ran it by kind of the different divisions. And so we were asked when we put golf into the general fund that we could then report it separate if people, they could see it separately. So as this is budgeted in our appropriations and in the budget, it's Parks and Rec, but golf is part of it. Here we're showing it separate just so because we were asked to do so. Again, intergovernmental, that has to do with the COVID. It has to do with all of the overtime that all the parks maintenance and Parks and Rec folks put in the parks over the summer. It was like 3 months of lots and lots. I mean, they had the most probably staff time charged to that grant was actually in Parks and Rec trying to keep the social distancing and stuff. So that's why Parks and Rec is a little bit higher up. Let's see. Oh, wait, sorry, wrong one. What I just said is true, but it's not right here. So this intergovernmental, that's what this 56 and 112. This 410 was Parks had applied for a grant for Iron Mountain Park at $400,000 and they didn't get it, but it was in the budget. So we ended up using their secondary funding source, which was their property tax money. They just put in the budget that they had applied for a grant and they hoped to get the grant and we're going to use that money first, but it didn't materialize. But what they did get is like $150,000 worth of overtime CARES Act money for their staff. And then down here at the golf course, I just wanted to highlight, I mean, they're not huge differences, but the golf course sales and services, that's their green fees and stuff. They're usually way under their projections. But because of COVID and it being an outdoor activity, we saw a huge uptick in greens fees. So, it's usually right here. So, you double that one, it'd be like 1.2. So they'd be 100,000 under. We saw $954,000. That's wild. But at the same time, what that ended up doing is it did cost more time for personnel to be there and more costs in maintaining the course, more costs for more service. But anyways, I just thought first time in 11 years, I saw the golf course crush its sales and services. I had to highlight that.
I saw that. I found it shocking too. I was wondering if there had been a switch line item, but it makes sense.
It's truly the greens fees. It's just,
Yep.
they couldn't keep enough. It was packed. So moving on down to the tourism fund, kind of the same story as the general fund. The only licenses and fees, the only way the tourism fund is really funded is through transient lodging taxes. The city gets 4.4% and 4.6% of the 6%, and the tourism fund gets 1.4% of the 6% tax. And so it just was much lower. I mean, you see it's down here. We were expecting to get 300 and something thousand per year, and we're down at 130,000. Yes, Councilor Mans?
Yeah, real quick. We don't have to, when there's a drop in transient lodging tax like that, we're not obligated to make up whatever the difference was or any amount to Clackamas County, do we? They've had to take their hit themselves, correct?
Yeah, no, this is just our taxes.
Okay.
So their taxes, they were hit by more than just our 5 hotels. They were hit by all the hotels in the county. So yeah, they're separate. Yep. Let's see, moving on to the next one, the building fund. Just want to point out just that, they were down. So when I was actually doing the calculation for the ARPA revenue, and we had to put it into calendar years, I found that calendar year 19 was an outstanding year, which was, we got to use as our base year for our ARPA calculation for revenue replacement, was a stellar year for permits. I don't know how many permits went out, but the dollars that we collected for permits, that was like, it was really robust for us. So like fiscal year 18-19, it wasn't the first 6 months, it was the last 6 months. And in fiscal year 19-20, it was the first 6 months of that. So, July through December of 19, that's where all the money was really coming in. And then it was slowly going down. And so calendar year 20, or this would be, it wasn't as robust, but they still did quite well. It's not like they're hurting.
Can you explain what the building fund is?
So the building fund is where all of our permits. So when a builder comes in, a developer comes in and is building a building, and they have to pull electrical permits and all those permits, that's what they do. And they have the inspectors go out and they do all the inspections. And so it's a self-sustaining fund in and of itself. Their funds can only be used, that money they collect can only be used for their purpose. It can't be used for anything else. And so did I answer the question? Okay. Chair Calibri, you're muted. Al, you're muted. Oh,
Sorry. Is it correct to interpret this in this way, that at the beginning of the biennium, we had a balance of 4.5 million, and at the end of it, we had about 5% less?
Probably not. I think it's really more around 5 million. What this report doesn't show you is what the actual ending balance is. This is because it's giving it as 0 because there isn't any activity in ending balance. The ending balance is really, if you took the revenues up here for all of this and then subtracted these away, but this report didn't do that. That's the one limitation to this report.
So the balance is higher than 4,250,000?
Yeah, that's what we had anticipated it being. But that's what we budgeted. We budgeted it to start at 4.4. We'd collect 5.2. We would spend all of this, but contingency is not really, it's part of fund balance too. So it'd make it 4.7, about 4.8 million if you added the two together, because you're not really going to spend contingency. You're just going to overspend one of these line items and move it up. But so we had anticipated ending the year with 4.8 million. And I think they ended the year a little bit higher because they're not only their revenues were down about $500,000, but their expenditures were down about 800,000. And so they were up about 250 from where they were more, they saved more on expenditures than they lost in not collecting revenues.
Yeah, I was looking at this, not so much, again, to get down into the weeds too much with this particular fund, but just to understand how we should be looking at these financial statements to say, well, we started the last biennium at level A and we ended it at some other level, higher or lower than where we started it before. So I just wondered if that's something that matters in city budgeting.
It does a little bit. I think what is more important is we anticipated getting a certain level of resources. Did we or did we not get them, and why? I think that's more important. If it's not, I mean, yes, when we do the actual budgets, we do this and then we do the estimates, and that's how we get the beginning balance for the next year. But so is it important? Yes. Does this report do it? No. I haven't found another to-year report, but
yeah, it's not meant to be a critical comment. Just so we have an understanding of how to perceive the starting and end points.
Yeah, it's basically the beginning reserve point, and some of them we'll talk about when we get to the policies. You know, you have to have ending balance because you're waiting on property taxes and they don't come in until the end of November, beginning of December. Well, you still have to pay all of those fees and the costs that you have between July and the end of November before you even get a dollar. So you have to have enough in your ending balance to get you there.
Right. Thank you.
Yep. So moving on to the next one of interest was the tennis center. And again, it's kind of the same story. Just we closed the tennis center for a while during COVID until we figured out how to run it. And so we didn't collect nearly as much as we thought we would. And they've been doing a remodel, so they have to get people in and out during that too. On to the next one is so we're moving on to page 4 of the 7 pages. Moving to basically the Parks Bond Fund. It's a capital projects fund that we put so we could clearly identify projects and just so that it doesn't get mixed in and commingled in with the general fund. We put this fund together. We had anticipated back when we went to, we're planning to sell these about 8-9 months before we did it, that we would sell about 20 million at those current interest rates. Well, interest rates surprisingly dropped. And for that amount of debt service that we were, that we wanted to keep it at, we were able to sell $25 million worth of bonds. So the debt service, so the property taxes, the geo bonds are still, costing the taxpayer the same amount that we had anticipated and we budgeted for. Just we were able to sell more of them up front because interest rates had dropped. So we were able to collect 25 million. And then with the capital outlay, again, we weren't sure how fast projects and stuff were going to be able to get out the door and that kind of stuff, but we wanted to put something there. So we put 12 million. Okay, we were grossly overestimated our ability to get projects out. That was more just not knowing. But they're all in budget, 21, 23. So we already knew this in the when we talked about the next budget. So moving on to the Parks and Rec one. Again, we had moved $2 million out of that previous Parks Bond project into this yet another separate project, capital project fund. We usually do, but we wanted to do this because we're doing it in tandem with the school district or together with the school district. So they can see everything for just that one project. And so this is really just the planning, part of the planning phase for the Parks and Rec pool project. So the water fund, let's see, the first one is, sales and services. This was a me thing. We accidentally budgeted off of a very dry year in the previous cycle instead of doing an average water year. And so we only came in at about 95%. What we should have budgeted in the first year was like 13.2 million and then 13.5 million. That would have been our average water year. So about 50% of our water sales, somewhere in there. In the water fund, it's not like the other ones where you can what did you do last year? Okay, then we know we have a 2% or 3% rate increase. So we can just take what we earned in the last fiscal year and then roll it forward. And that's what we can use for an estimate. The water one, because weather plays such a huge, changes it up and down so much, you have to take an average year. So we did come in much better than our average year because fiscal year 2021, this one right here, was actually much drier in the summer. So the first 3 months of the year were much drier. And so we actually had a pretty healthy positive variance for, even though it says negative, it was actually a much better year. So what that does is it goes into the fund balance. It allows us to keep it for projects, so we don't have to raise rates as much in the future because we've already collected some funds currently. So it's not a bad thing. It just, you don't see that for a couple of years. But my point here is we didn't collect 95% of our water. We were a little over 100% of what we should have collected. This was just when we went to the budget, because I had to figure out when we were doing the budget for the 21-23 biennium, why is this so far up? So then I had to go back and recalculate. Anyways, then again, the miscellaneous revenues. This is, we did a project at the intake there in Gladstone. As part of the project, we added another pump or something. I'm not an engineer, but so we added something that was split with Tigard, and so Tigard paid us for it, and that's why for about $250,000 is what they paid us for their part of the project. We weren't sure when it was going to be done or how much or how we were going to charge them because of our so it wasn't in the budget, but the project was, the revenue wasn't. So that's what this is. This is Tigard actually paying us for part of the intake work. Now, capital outlay is a little low, primarily just projects rolling over. These were budgeted in the 21-23, so we already know about these. Basically, one of them was the telemetry project that got moved over, but then another one was the McVeigh pump station, and that one, it was budgeted for this biennium, except that they had to wait. They were still waiting for the Southside storage study to be done, so they know exactly what kind of work specifically when they're in their design phase and that kind of stuff. So that actually got bumped off of it. So that's why. Moving on to sewer. Again, the only thing really to talk about here is capital. It's basically about 3 projects rolling over to the 21-23 biennium. They're just taking longer with construction. So, the design phase and stuff took a little longer than they anticipated. So it just rolled into the next year. So that would have been the lowest interceptor work done, the Blue Heron, and then some more just wastewater rehab. And then one project, the South Shore I&I reduction thing, the bid came in twice as high as was budgeted. So they're going back out to, they only got one bid. So they decided that they were just going to push that one forward. So again, it's just timing of projects. It's not that projects aren't getting done. They're just taking a little longer. So they're pushing forward. We always kind of budget for the best case scenario. So we have the authorization to do it, but sometimes it takes a little longer. But the projects are.
Tom, I have a question on this. So are you saying that the water and sewer were overspent, or is it just not budgeted properly?
No, it's budgeted. I wouldn't even say it's not even budgeted properly. So when we budget, for us, we can't really have a negative variance in our appropriation level. So when we build a budget, let's say we have a project that could take 18 to 36 months. We have to budget it for it taking 18 months. And then if we get to the end of the budget and it doesn't, and some of it has to go into the next budget cycle, then we'll rebudget that portion that needed to go into the next budget cycle into it. So basically what happened here is quite a few of the projects. I mean, it's just, there's a lot of reasons that projects are just taking longer, from getting materials, getting contractors, getting bids back. I mean, there's a lot of things. So when we built the budget, we were thinking best case scenario, and we're more in average, it's not going as quickly. And that's really all that's happening. It's not that the projects aren't happening. It's not that these dollars aren't already, when we're doing the CIP, that if those aren't actually already allocated to all those funded projects, it's just instead of happening in 1921, a lot of it might happen in 21-23. And then some of the projects in 21-23, we'll still get to those, or they might have to go into 23-25, just depending really on, the design, the plan, the planning, the design, and then getting the contractors out to actually do the work. Sometimes it just takes a little longer, but from a budget perspective, we want to make sure we have those dollars prior to actually committing. We don't want to say, we're going to get the dollars here and here and here. And then, so we just want to make sure it's all dialed in before we commit to a project.
Can I ask a follow-up question on that?
Please.
You did such a great job at the first part. Do we have any sort of encumbrance, sort of visibility so that we know what we're committed to? In essence, let's say we take on a 36-month project for $20 million and we spend $8 the first year. How do we know that that $12 million, how do we know what the commitments are of the city so that in case somebody falls off or leaves, that we don't know that there's something hanging out there that we don't have visibility on?
No, yeah, so no, we do. So in every line item in the budget, it doesn't just, it just doesn't say capital outlay or split up by capital outlay. It has actually which project it is. And so we'll have a listing like 8 projects. This is the dollar amount that we've set aside for that. And it's done by year. And then when we get to the new budget, the next budget cycle, we then will put those into the next one. And now we need to do these ones. So it is line by line. And it's also in the CIP. So when we do the funded parts of the CIP, we're actually looking at our forecasts and looking at making sure that, the projects needed to go forward are going forward, and they are still funded and there is still money, and that we're not saying that we could fund $48 million worth of projects, but we only have $36 million to commit. No, we are tracking those.
Right, but how would a line manager, do they have a PO category or whatever, so they know what's committed?
Oh yeah, and in our AP systems, we're doing like contracts and that kind of stuff. We'll put in a purchase order into our system, and it does track the encumbrances for large contracts.
Okay.
And little ones, $600, we're not going to do that for, but $5 million, we're
right.
Most definitely.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So now moving on to stormwater. I just was on a roll with capital outlay for these, but 81%, it's actually not too bad. It's pretty normal. Yeah, it's like, I don't even know if we want to talk about. Oh, sorry, Ron.
Yeah, can I ask a trivial new guy question?
Sure.
Is it possible to move the headers over to these pages just so that they're a little easier to track?
Oh, yeah, I can do that in the next time.
Okay.
So
right.
let's just help all of us out. The first column is actual, right?
No, this column is the biennial budget. The
Okay.
second column is the first year. The third column is the second year. And this is the variance from budget. When you add these two together, this is the variance column.
Okay.
Yeah, I can do that next time.
Thanks.
Let's see. Yeah, so this one is really basically primarily 2 projects taking, again, the same idea where it wasn't the short amount that we had planned. It's taking a little bit longer. So they are budgeted in fiscal year 21-23. It was the Fosberg Road Drainage Improvement Construction Project and the Goodall Road Drainage Improvements. So they're primarily done, but they had to move a little bit. So this one actually is pretty good at 81%. Let's see, and that's at the top of page 5, or in page 5. That one was, sorry, I forgot to tell you to move that one. Now we're going to go to the street fund. Now, this intergovernmental is not the CARES Act. I'd like to say that for one. This is not due to CARES that we're at 119. So the difference here is when we built the 1921 budget, we didn't put in the Clackamas County vehicle registration fee, only because the last time when we built this budget, like when they were talking about it, they had already passed the same fee or a similar fee to help out with the Selwood Bridge, and the voters nixed it. So we didn't want to put something in there. We were afraid that the voters were going to go back and take back off the rolls. And it just helps, get a balance to do a street project. So we thought we would be conservative and not try to put a bunch of projects that we were going to try to build on when we weren't getting it to be. And then the fee actually did take much longer to get going. So, but they did get finally caught up, and we're getting about $700,000 a year. So the first year we got about a little over 300. And then the second year we got a little over $700,000. So the 700 is where they think we'll be for quite a while for that vehicle registration fee. This miscellaneous revenues that had to do with actually selling bonds, which you'll see the next highlight is the other financing sources. We sold bonds, and the beginning, and it's our fund balance. So basically our balance invested in our investments just came back. So this is a favorable amount of interest that we've been earning on those bond proceeds. And then again, we sold bonds for the street fund where we're going to use the House Bill 2017 dollars, the additional $800,000 a year. The idea was to bond those up front, and then we could do a lot of projects, and then we'd pay it back over the next 20 years with that extra $800,000 we were getting in our state shared revenue for street fees or gas taxes and DMV fees and that kind of stuff. And it was a much more favorable interest rate environment for that $800,000 debt service. And so that 10.4 became 12.5 that went into the fund that we did projects with. And that's where you saw all of those streets getting paved. Like last summer was just, you couldn't drive anywhere in town without paving. So that is the street fund. Moving on to the system development charges. So these are basically charges that developers pay when they put a house in, and we put them in the bank to help as soon as, it's basically to help negative impacts to our, say, water system. So a 4-inch pipe, now we need a 6-inch pipe, to deliver water because there's so many new houses on some. So this money here, so when one house comes on, or one building or whatever, we charge a certain amount that we set aside, and then it helps us do projects that are capacity enhancing. And so basically the only thing that you can use with this fund is capital projects. But
Hey,
it's
Sean,
yeah.
question for you on SDCs. So anecdotally, people think, oh, there's been so much building in the last 12, 13 months in like Oswego, so many new houses going up. But according to this line item, it would make it seems like development has not been as I guess as much as people would think. Would you agree? Or just
because you don't get, so we give credit to, say it's a tear down and then you build a new house. So let's say you took down a 1,000 square foot house in Evergreen neighborhood and you put in a 2,500 square foot house in Evergreen, and you went from a 1-inch water pipe to another 1-inch water pipe. Well, you're going to get credit for everything that was there before. And so it ends up being a wash. You don't get any SDCs from something like that. Now, if they went from a 3/4-inch water line to a 1-inch water line, there's a small little increase, but there's no real parks. That's, it's still the same. So there aren't any. So say we have 80 new homes in LO every year, or 60 new homes or whatever, half of them are tear downs and replacements. And so there aren't any SDCs for that. Where we get a lot of them, let's say like the Windward. Again, for the commercial that was there before, they get credit for that and they put commercial back, but they also put 200 and some odd apartment units. And so someone plays something like parks. And so, the big balance of this is actually the parks SDC. So the SDCs actually, I should say, this has all 4 utilities and parks in it, but parks is probably the largest balance that's in there. And
so we can't really use SDCs as a measure of residential development or commercial development.
It's more new development, or it's just, or how was it affecting the system? Is there more demand because there's bigger
on the system? Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. And so basically the capital outlay, one of them is from the street SDC. It's probably $1.5 million of that variance has to do with not putting in the street light at Jean and Pilkington. It's going in, it just got moved because of some land use stuff. And then the other one was parks. They had Woodmont and Iron Mountain. So half of Iron Mountain and all of Woodmont was getting paid with SDCs, but then both those projects came in under what they had first estimated after the design and that kind of stuff. So there was another million plus between those two projects that was favorable. So that's the difference here. Now we're moving on to page 5, and for the top half of this, and then page 6 for the bottom half. Engineering fund, just more capital. This was for some GIS, let's see, some survey and GPS systems, and basically vehicle replacement. With COVID, they didn't do the replacement, but it is in the 21-23 to do the vehicle replacement that for this $44,000 here for a new vehicle. But anyways, it wasn't a big dollar amount, but like I said, at 36%, I thought I should probably bring it up. And then this is my last slide. And this is our endowment. So our endowments are done slightly different than our other investments. These are actually held by OCF, Oregon Community Foundations. They hold, they've been doing it since I think 2003, so well before I was here. And so our endowments are held in a different kind of investment. So like I'm only able to invest in very like T-bills and agencies and stuff like that. So it's really low risk. You're really worried more about maintaining the dollars. Our endowments are looking out at a 50-year horizon. So, much more like, because we're only spending the investment income for the most part on those if we're spending anything. There's a few instances where we'll use the capital or the corpus part of the endowments, but for the most part, that's what we're doing. So OCF really follows the market, like stock market. So if you're see how the stock market goes. And so you can kind of see we started with about 3.6 million in the library endowment and we'll call it $2.2 million in the ACC endowment. And so, that first year, so at the beginning of the biennium, the Dow Jones was at about 26,500. And it went down by the end of the year to 25,800. So you'll see these little negatives in our investment income for those. But then by the end of the last year, so June 30th, it was sitting at 34,500. So like the first year, the Dow went down 3%. The next year it went up 87%. So you can kind of see, not quite double. I mean, not quite half of it, but we got a pretty healthy amount of growth in both of these. But that's why. And so it's hard for us. We kind of assume between 3 and 5%. That usually was pretty good for a while, but no one saw the stock market going from like in the last 4 years, 16,000 to like what 34,000. I mean, that's just insane. So that's why these ones are so different. Since this is a city budget meeting, I probably won't go over the next 4 funds, which are Laura budget or the Laura one. So this was the end of this. So any other questions would be great.
Great job, Sean. Thank you, Director.
Thank you very much, Director Cross. Really appreciate that. I like Ron's suggestion also. Yes, Councilor Wendland, I see your hand.
So going back to the parks bond, just to explain that. So you put out the bonds and we collected, instead of 20, we collected 25 or 24. Is that correct?
Yes.
Or we sold. So and it was a $30 million bond. So we have another 5 million to float, or is that somewhat of a premium that we're getting?
So we have about 6 million. It was an interesting sale. There wasn't much premium involved. This the way they bid it, and it was across the board. It wasn't just one. It was all of them kind of bid it that way. So I think we sold 24 million par for 25 million. So we still have about 6 million left to sell as soon as this last parks bond rolls off the rolls the end of next year. So we could, that way. But yeah, so there's still 6 more million to sell of the 30 million.
So essentially we have about $1 million premium then.
Yes.
We'll have 31 to spend. out of 30 million.
Unless we get a little premium on the 6. So yeah, but it'll be
Okay.
small.
Okay. Thank you.
Mayor Buck, I see your hand raised.
Thank you. Sean, well, 2 questions. The first, with the beginning fund balances, obviously they're, my question, I have 2 questions, are both about beginning fund balances. The one, there's Fund 815, the City of Laura Debt Service Fund, shows beginning fund balances for both fiscal years, whereas the other columns just show the beginning fund balance, for the first half of the biennium. So why does that one fund show it for?
Yeah, so 815, so the city actually took out all the full faith and credit debt for Laura, and then the city loans it as a note to Laura. And Laura, as soon as we pay, the city pays the debt, Laura pays the city. I mean, it's simultaneous. And so there is no beginning balance, there's no ending balance. It's almost just like it's a wash. So as soon as we pay it, or we could say Laura paid us first and then we paid it. I mean, it all happens the same day. So, and so it's always running a zero balance.
So then these kind of differentials between what we budget and then what the actual fund balance ends up becoming, we can see like through the questions that have been asked in this conversation that sometimes projects, aren't completed, so that expenditure didn't happen, creating like a higher fund balance that we would have expected, et cetera. Or perhaps we take in more, but then that revenue then gets spent, because the project's still happening. But when revenue, say for a department is greater, than expected, and that beginning fund balance is higher. I mean, most of these are pretty close, but there's some with bigger balances. When it comes to budgeting, when we have more money to budget than we thought that we budgeted to begin with, what challenges does that present to this process, if any?
To the process, that's where we get, we always say you have some one-time dollars. That is that $1.5 million to $2 million at the beginning of the biennium. It's about $1 million a year, give or take. I mean, it could be a little more, it could be a little less. And it's usually, I put back up the general fund revenues, because that's really the revenues that you have to say to what you can do, kind of what projects you want to put them toward. If it's, revenue in the street fund, it has to be spent on the street fund. If it's sewer, it has sewer. And we have policy that says one utility can't loan the other utility money. And the only thing we can loan money from is the general fund. So really, this is where we focus. And that's really when, like this 1.4 million here, that is where we said you had like extra money, about $1 million, whatever. And then you used it for pathways. There wasn't any funding for pathways, but this is, that's that one-time dollars versus that's what it's, the extra money. Now, let's say there was a resource like in the street fund where we were budgeting $2 million a year toward state shared revenues, and then House Bill 2017 passed, something like that. Now we're getting $2.7 million. That's an ongoing $700,000. And so that you can enhance a program, you can do things like that, but that's more of the ongoing revenue. So it's just really, when you have the differences, you have to know, is it an ongoing, so we can, use it toward operations or whatever, or is it a one-time windfall and we can use it for a project or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director Cross. I thought, sorry, Councilor Wendland. So
you have a lack of ability to create reports for the biennium. Is that kind of the problem? Why you don't have totals anywhere, or why you don't have any grand totals, or where we?
Yeah. Our software is really set up for annual. We're working on biennial. Next time we do this, I can put more headers and more, I can do all these things you're suggesting.
Okay. I think it would be, in all honesty, I mean, each category looks like it's kind of doing okay. You explain the differences and so on, but it's tough for us to take a look and say, how are we doing overall? I mean, a lot of us are at the superficial level, sort of, or at the top level, and we may not know all the details, but I mean, I don't know, are we pretty close to being on projection as a total?
Oh, most definitely. we're looking actually really, really good. I mean, I hate to admit, but COVID, besides the hotel motel, we aren't doing too bad. And, I mean, and all this, the CARES money and now the ARPA money, it's helping. I mean, I don't want to sound bad, like, oh no, we haven't, no, but we're not hurting as bad as we could if we didn't have those other funding sources.
Right. And my point is that I think you have done a great job. And I think the city manages the money very well. But there's no headline here to say that we are kind of on budget per se, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I mean, because we talked about this when we were doing when we built the new budget, the 21-23 budget. And so really the biggest thing was we weren't getting hotel motel. So our transient lodging taxes were down. That was the big, with parks with their revenues coming in, but they also didn't have the expenditures going out. And you'll see that in building, they don't have as many expenditures going out, even though the revenues are down. So everything's looking just about how we had expected it. They're probably looking just a little bit better. But except like the tourism fund, that is the one that isn't looking as good. It's because we're able to cut. I guess if the revenues aren't coming out up and we're using them for a certain program, we're not going to spend the expenditures on that program. So we're able to dial things back if we need to.
Right.
And it keeps us where we're supposed to be.
I want to recognize Councilor Manson. Then I think we need to move on to the next agenda item if we can. But I think these are really good questions, and I don't mean to cut the conversation short, but I also would like us to finish on time. So, Councilor Manson.
Yeah, quickly. I just wanted to point out that we do have the budget dashboard on the website still, correct, Sean?
Yes, and Anthony's going to present that next, so everyone can see where everything is.
Perfect.
Like as of yesterday. So yeah, so it updates every night. So
right.
So yeah, so it'll be you can see, and you can drill down pretty good into different things, and it'll show all of that. So yeah, so the dashboard is probably the best document to getting really real-time data where you're wanting see how we're doing.
So that's a very good segue. And I also need to apologize because at the beginning of the meeting I meant to ask and should have asked about a break. We are, as a time check, we have 25 more minutes, which means we're probably not going to finish the entire agenda. And the way that we'll cut that back a little bit is on the financial policies, because we thought that there would not be enough time to cover all of them anyway. But we might get through one or two, but I think at a minimum, we will know how to navigate to them and review them and see them and then ask questions. But Director Hooper, I guess I'm just thinking, first of all, is there anybody who wants to have a break if we need a break? I respect that if we do. I don't see any hands. So my suggestion is that we do a little bit of navigation to show where the dashboard is and explain one or two, and then maybe we can guide the members to where to get that information and then form their questions from that. And then we'll spend a little bit more time on the financial policy. Not to cut you short. I don't mean to do that, but okay.
All right, I will take it away from here. So I first want to show you how to navigate to the financial dashboard. And so the way that you get to it is, from our main page, you go to the government tab and you go down to finance. And then you go to the finance page. And then if you go down to the fourth tab, there's the financial dashboard. If you click, actually, you can just click right there on the little dashboard tab here, and I'll bring you right to it. I should start by saying that this is a really neat and dynamic tool that not a lot of cities have. And Wes Pay, our IT director, put this together. And in fact, the city of Dallas in Oregon saw this dashboard and liked it so much that they contracted with Wes and his team to create one for them. And so I really highly encourage all of you to spend some time with this tool. And so the first thing you do is you click drill down, And you can see an overview of the resources to expenditures at this point in time. And once again, this is updated recently. You can also, I also want to bring your attention to this drop down. So you can go to 2019, 20, 21, and to the points that were made. This is a visual representation of what Sean was talking about. And you can actually drill into any of these from not only from 2019-20 last biennium, but you can go back to 2015-16. And so I want to stick with this year though, because I want to kind of show you where we're at kind of the quarter-ish a milestone. And so what I want to do is kind of show you a few different ways to view this. So the first one is you can click on these different tabs. And so the summary one, this one will show you in another graphical form of the fund balances and also the expenditures and kind of a roll up. And then there's also a table here that shows all of it, and this is for the whole citywide summary. And then once again, you can see it this form. So if you wanted to get some more information, let's say that I want to actually look at the IT budget. First thing you do is you click on the general fund. So you click on that graph, and then here shows you all the different departments within the general fund. And you can get a snapshot of where we are with our resources, which are in blue, to our expenditures, and you can hover over them to get an idea. And so I want to go to IT, so they're in general administration. So I click on that one, and that brings us to general administration. And then I can take a look at all of these and go to IT. So if I click on that, it will bring me to the IT department. So what you see here is a detailed of the revenues on top, and then the expenditures on the bottom in yellow. So one thing I want to first bring your attention to is the color coding. So you have under the percentages, you have a snapshot of kind of how we're doing to this particular point in time. So the breakdown is that if we are basically on resources, if we don't have, if you have 8% or lower, it will show in red. If 16% shows that we're right in target and 25% shows that we're really good. And how you derive that number is that you divide the total where we are in this month. So we're started the biennium in July 1. So we're about 4 months in, and 4 months divided by 24, because it's a biennium, it's 24 months, is 16%, just about. And so once again, please keep in mind that the budget numbers are all based on a biennium. So if you want to get the annual, you would divide it by 2. So this gives you a quick, just really graphical idea of how they are doing on their budget as of yesterday or the day before. So if you look at this, you can get a pretty good idea that they're right on target pretty much with everything. It shows red for part-time salaries, but keep in mind this is $460, so the amount really matters. And when you have an overall personnel budget that's $2 million plus, $460 doesn't even register. So sometimes I would keep in mind the numbers too, because they really do matter when you're looking at the color coding. And so on any one of these items, if I was curious of understanding a little bit more on them, let's say that I wanted to find out a little bit more about what is other purchase services, for example, I can click on that and it will bring me to a deeper dive, and I can take a look at the breakdown even within that category. And so we see that it's telephone service charges, and so far as of we're $17,000 we've spent of the overall budget for the 2-year biennium, and then you can also see miscellaneous communication as well in that category. So up top here, you can navigate and go back by clicking on the tabs. So I'll go back. And one thing I think that would be helpful is that if you click the summary tab here, you can also see, once again, a graphical form of the expenditures in the resources, of course. And you can drill down again to get back to where we were. One thing I think I want to bring your attention to again is that, once again, there's a drop-down menu, And you can take a look at, back in 2015-16 and see how they did for that year. And you can see that once again, that they their overall budget did very well. They're 89% of the total. So IT department usually always comes pretty close and usually a little bit under spending. So I think I'll pause right here because I kind of gone fast and said a lot of things. Does anybody have any questions? And please just unmute and speak up because I can't see you. Yeah.
I see member Cruz's hand up.
Yeah, that's wonderful information. How do we get to it again?
Yeah. So if you go to, if you go to the regular web page, so let's go ahead and just do that. So here's the main page. And if you go to the government tab, you go to finance. And then on this banner, it's the fourth one down. And if you just click on this right here, dashboard, it'll bring you right to it. And then you got to click into it from that point. So you got to drill down to start taking a look at it.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions before I move on to show another example? One thing I want to talk about for example, on the IT budget is that what I would recommend is taking a look also in tandem with the actual budget document, and you can get an idea of the things that they are purchasing through here, even more detail. So it tells you that the M&S includes things like, you can read it yourself, but they, buy computer equipment and do, say, telephone charges. This is really a summary of all the different items that are within that category in some detail. This one's a pretty simple budget, but I think on more complex budgets, it will tell you that like professional and technical will really be explained here. And you won't, and it's a good accompanying document to the dashboard. So one more that I would like to show you is the street fund. And so I will go ahead and drill down to that one. And I like the table view. I think it's the simplest one to view. In this, you'll see that there's basically 3 buckets of funds. You have the street fund resources, you have street project management, and you have street maintenance. So let's go ahead and click on street project management. And what I really want to pull your attention to in this one is capital improvements, but I think once again, you can get a quick snapshot of how we're doing, and we're doing really well in all these categories. As you can see that they're all either green or yellow. So just at a glance, you can get an idea of how we're doing, to date. And if there's any red, then you can click into it more. And once again, I would recommend that everybody just kind of play around with this and kind of click through and take a look at it. And if you have questions, then you can give me or Sean a call. I think so. Let's click on capital improvements, and so this one, I think what I want to show you is that you can get a pretty good idea of, once again, that we've spent. We're right on target right now on street overlays and restoration. We should be at 16%. We're at 17%, so that's right where we need to be. I do want to show you last year's because I think it's helpful to look at. So you have. Once again, we spent 100% of what we budgeted for street overlays last year, which is pretty perfect. Doesn't always work out that way. And if you notice that number at 16 million is for Biennium. For the single year we spent 1.6 back in 2015-16. So we have a lot more capital now than we had back in 2015-16 by a huge margin. And so once again, go back to the 2021-23 budget. You see that the total amount for street overlays is $9.4 million. Another accompanying document that I would recommend that you all look at is going to the CIP. And so let's see, let's go ahead and click on that one if I can. Okay, that one would be right here. No, wait, here. Okay, so this for the CIP, you can see that it has a listing of all the projects that we're doing this year and next year. And when you add the total of 5.9 and 3.5 million, you get to the exact total that we have listed in that dashboard. But it gives you a detailed accounting or detail of what different projects fall within that category. So once again, I would use a dashboard with these documents to really get a good idea of what they entail. So I added those two up, and they exactly match the totals do to this.
You don't.
So-
You shouldn't seem so surprised.
Yeah, I'm not. Sean Cross and his team, and also our IT department, do a really good job of just making sure that it's all synced together and that everything flows together, and it does beautifully. Once again, I think I'm going to. I gave them a lot of information here. I think I'm going to stop and take some questions, and I'll stop sharing my screen now. But I think that was just a quick overview, and it was very fast. I clicked through a lot of buttons. I hopefully I didn't lose everybody, but I recommend you playing with it. I think it's very intuitive. I think there's a lot of information to be gleaned really quickly about what we're doing and how we're doing, with our budget. So, any questions?
Oh, I see.
I think it's a
Tina's
terrific
hand
tool.
and Vice Chair Lynn's.
So this is really great. Who takes a look at this on a daily basis, and whose buzzer goes off when it hits the rate?
Yeah, so all the directors and all the managers are supposed to keep tabs on their own budgets and make sure that where they're spending is right. And once again, I think in categories they can overspend, but it's the overall amounts that's really important. But it's a really good tool for them just at a glance to get an idea of, hey, are we on target, are we not, and to monitor that. So, yep.
Okay,
Good question.
Okay, thank you. Shima?
Yeah, thank you. This was great, Anthony. I'm a big fan of dashboards, and that looks really good. I'm just wondering, is it a manual push, or does it automatically update every so often?
It's automatically updates. However, it's been a manual push because they're working out something. So, but it does update regularly. As you'll notice, it's a day late. So there's a slight thing that they're fixing right now. But it does automatically push.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Manager Hooper. I thought that was very helpful. And I know that as we talked about in the last budget meeting, that the issue here for Budget Committee isn't that there's a paucity of information. It's that we have a lot of information, and it's very difficult to first of all know where everything is, or things that you would want to analyze an issue. And secondly, understanding the structure of things. And so that's really kind of what the foundations are we're trying to build here. And I think that both you and Director Cross did a great job of launching that. We have about 9 minutes left. And I think that Director Cross, my suggestion is if we can, because I'd like just 2 minutes at the end to go over feedback issues. So is it generous of me to give you 7 of the remaining 9 minutes and just show us how to get to the financial policies, maybe go over one?
Okay. Let's see. Sorry about that. I was just going to use slides, but I'll show you how to get there.
No, that's great. That's good.
Let's see. It's not being nice to me. I usually just search. Unlike Anthony, he knows exactly where to go. I just really have to.
I just Google it,
Yeah.
actually, you know.
Yeah. Oh, it's just under, so you go to the finance page and then it's just under financial policies. So here is the city's financial policies. Just a quick, I guess what I have, like 4 minutes. Generally, we have a couple ways that we have these policies come about. Either they're mandated to us, like, or the Oregon state's having us do, or they're best practices. So we're doing what's best. And so those are kind of the way that these policies come about. They're easy to find. I think I had given everyone a link, or Anthony was nice enough to give the link to everyone that they could go through them all. But they're kind of broke up into different things. I mean, different kind of categories. General, of course, and then you have the revenue and expenditures. The fund balance is probably is kind of one of the more fun ones. Hopefully we can get into that next time, because it really talks about why we have our ending balances the way that we have them, or why we have operating reserves and stuff. Anyway, so this is kind of where to find it. Did you want me to go through them tonight, Al, or did you want me to start, or just we do it next time, or what are you thinking?
We knew that we weren't going to have time to cover all of them, and I think that perhaps it's just for now, I'm just going to suggest that unless somebody has a burning desire to dive in now, I think you've shown us how to get to it, and we know where they are. I think a good homework assignment would be to have everybody visit that, and then next time we'll do a little deeper dive, if that's okay with everybody, unless there's an objection. Okay, I don't see any hands. So we knew that was going to be a little bit challenging to get very far through them, but at least we know they're there and they're relevant.
Yeah. Okay.
So the final thing, Jennifer, can you bring up those slides? And I'm not going to read the PowerPoint slides that we prepared, which was, I just wanted to share the feedback from the onboarding, which is part of the same process. And as I said, I'm not going to read everything here. We've got 3 unattributed responses. I don't know if people were just trying to be nice or what, but I would characterize them as generally favorable. If anybody who wrote one of these disagrees, please speak up. But I think that, but there were also very good suggestions, and I would want to work with city staff and incorporate these suggestions in the next onboarding session. So you can see here some of the comments that are made. There were some requests to have more examples from the slide deck and so on. So again, the difference is the onboarding is somebody brand new, just coming in, never saw anything. We want to give them a rough idea. The purpose of these sessions, these interim meetings between deliberative budget meetings is really more of a deep dive, more of a training and development opportunity. So can you flip the next slide real quick, just so people can get an idea? And I guess I anticipated that we had a 90-minute program, and I'm a keen believer in having and respecting people's time and not having half-day sessions on these things. I mean, I think that none of us can become as knowledgeable as Director Cross or Jennifer and other professionals, but that isn't the objective. The objective, I think, really is for us to have more familiarity, help us to form and articulate our questions better, and ultimately save time when we move into deliberative sessions. So, and the third one, maybe if you could just bring that up very quickly. And I'm not going to go through this again, but if we can flip to the next one, we're asking now that we also evaluate this session And you won't hurt my feelings. You might hurt the feelings of Deputy Manager Hooper or Director Cross, but I don't think you'll hurt my feelings. And please give us your honest appraisal. Really, I think the ultimate test of this is, are we adding value? Is this process adding value? And if the answer is no, then we should probably look to make changes. And if it is adding value, then how can we improve it? So it's just in the spirit of continuous improvement. I would just ask one favor, if I know you're all extremely busy, but referencing this particular session tonight, if you could just, when you have a moment, let us have your answer to these questions. That is, I think, all that I had. Any final comments from Mayor Buck, perhaps, or City Manager Bennett, or Deputy Manager Hooper, or Director Cross?
Thank you for running this on-time meeting, Al. This is great. We appreciate it.
We respect your time, Mayor Buck, and you all are really, I admire how you were able to dedicate this much time to public service. I see Vice Chair Carson's hand up in the upper corner.
Yes, I want to say, Al, thank you for sending forward the document from Jeff that did an analysis on funded projects and how those funded projects improved and increased over the last decade. I'm very impressed with those numbers. I'm impressed with what Jeff did. And I would like to point out that only Estella Council, mayors, and city managers are able to do these things. So I'm very satisfied and happy with those numbers that Jeff found for us. And kudos to the team. Keep up the good work and get more things funded.
Thank you, Vice Chair Carson. Okay, I have precisely 7:30, and unless somebody else has another comment, which will put us over time and break my promise, I will call the meeting adjourned at 7:30.
And did you also want to mention that if we are going on our schedule, the next meeting would be February 2022?
Thank you. Yes, thanks for reminding me. You're very good at that. And hopefully we'll all be together again. Be well, stay safe.
Stay safe. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Al. Bye, everyone.
Bye.